I'm Emily, and I always knew my family had a talent for making the happiest moments feel like warnings I should have listened to. On the day of my wedding, while guests twirled under fairy lights and the air smelled like roses and champagne, I overheard my sister say something that made my stomach lurch. "He's just a charity case," she snorted, swirling wine in her glass like she wasn't talking about my stepson, my child, in every way that matters. I stood frozen between the cake table and the DJ booth, still holding the knife. That's when I realized I was marrying into love, but I'd never really escaped the cruelty I was born into. My heels clicked across the polished floor as I walked away from the voices that stabbed deeper than they knew. They didn't stop talking. They never did. I slipped into the back hallway near the kitchen where it was quiet, save for the muffled clatter of dishes and the hum of the cooler fans. I stared at the wall, breathing shallowly, trying to stop the tears before they could rise and ruin my makeup. But more than that, I didn't want to give them the satisfaction. Not tonight. I'd grown up in a house where love was rationed like medicine. My mother believed in discipline, not affection. Praise was currency only handed out when earned, and rarely at that. My sister Clarissa was the favorite. Always had been. Blonde, brilliant, delicate. She could say the most vicious things with a smile and everyone called it charming. I was the resilient one. The one who wore last season's hand-me-downs while Clarissa got custom dresses. The one who got a pat on the back when Clarissa got a standing ovation. And when I met Daniel, widowed, gentle-eyed, with a little boy who clung to his leg like a lifeline, I knew exactly what my mother would think. "A man with baggage," she'd sniffed, waving a hand like she was brushing off lint. "You're settling, Emily." But it didn't feel like settling. It felt like belonging. For the first time in my life, I had someone look at me like I wasn't a placeholder. Like I was the whole damn page. Ethan, his son, had been slow to warm. Which I expected. He'd lost his mom. He didn't need another woman swooping in and trying to replace her. So I didn't. I just showed up. I made pancakes every Sunday. I helped with math homework. I sat on the bathroom floor with him when he had the flu and held the trash can while he puked. Slowly, he started calling me M. Then Mom. Quietly. Like he was testing the word on his tongue. I never corrected him. I just kissed his forehead and whispered, "You'll never feel second best." And now, here I was, on my wedding day, listening to my sister laugh about that same little boy like he was some broken toy I'd picked up at a garage sale. My face burned. My hands shook. I should have stormed over, flipped the table, screamed that he was my son and she didn't get to say a damn thing. But I didn't. Not yet. I returned to the reception, smile painted on like the rest of the night hadn't just cracked something open inside me. Daniel pulled me into a slow dance. Ethan grinned at me from his little table near the front. And I told myself I'd deal with Clarissa tomorrow. I could pretend for a few more hours. Just until the cake. Just until the knife. I was 6 years old the first time my mother told me I was too much. Too loud, too sensitive, too dramatic. I had cried because a baby bird fell from its nest and died in our backyard, and instead of comforting me, she looked at me like I was defective. "Not everything is a tragedy, Emily," she said, stepping over the tiny body like it was just another fallen leaf. That moment stuck in my bones like frostbite, quiet, numbing, but always there. Clarissa, on the other hand, cried perfectly. Soft, camera-ready tears during school recitals or when boys broke her heart. My mother would cradle her like fine china. "She's delicate," she'd whisper. As if I was some cast-iron skillet, useful, indestructible, and not particularly pleasant to look at. By the time I was a teenager, I'd stopped trying. I knew I couldn't compete with Clarissa's ballet trophies, or her flawless skin, or the way she called our mother Mummy, like we were in some British period drama. I kept my head down, got decent grades, saved money from my after-school job folding clothes at a department store, while Clarissa got a car for her sweet 16. I knew who I was in our family. I was the background, the reliable one. The one who wouldn't be missed if she disappeared. When I brought Daniel home for dinner the first time, I watched my mother scan him like he was an auction item. She saw the plain suit, the calluses on his hands, and, worst of all, the 5-year-old boy clinging to his leg. She smiled, of course. My mother always smiled. But her eyes, they said everything. How tragic, she murmured to me later in the kitchen. A man with a dead wife and a child? That's a lot of grief to inherit. Clarissa was worse. She didn't even try to hide her disdain. You've always had a savior complex, she said, swirling wine like it was holy water. But come on, Em, you could do better. Better. As if Daniel wasn't kind and patient and the only person who'd ever made me feel truly seen. As if Ethan's shy hugs and tentative drawings of us as a family weren't more valuable than any ring or resume. But that was my family. Love was conditional. Approval was currency. And the minute I stepped outside their mold, I became a liability. When Daniel proposed, I knew what was coming. My mother called it impulsive. Clarissa called it desperate. I didn't care. I said yes anyway. I wanted a family that loved because they chose to, not because they had to. And yet, in the weeks leading up to the wedding, the cracks deepened. My dress was too simple. The venue was too rustic. My mother said Ethan shouldn't be in the ceremony. He's not really yours, darling. Clarissa refused to walk beside him in the procession. It'll look weird in photos, she said, wrinkling her nose like his presence was an eyesore. I tried to let it go. I really did. I told myself they'd come around. That once they saw how happy Daniel made me, they'd soften. That they'd fall in love with Ethan like I had. But I was wrong. And on the night of my wedding, standing with frosting on my hands and that knife in my grip, I realized something I should have known a long time ago. They didn't see Ethan as family. And they never really saw me that way either. The dream was simple. Silly, even, if you said it out loud. A family dinner where everyone laughed, not at each other, but with each other. Ethan's art hanging on the fridge next to my childhood photos. Holidays with mismatched pajamas and inside jokes. A refrigerator calendar full of little notes. Ethan's science fair, Daniel's birthday, stepmom, Saturday. A house full of noise and love and choice. I used to close my eyes at night and picture it like a movie reel, soft-edged and golden lit. My second chance at something whole. Something healing. I didn't marry Daniel because I needed rescuing. I married him because I saw someone who knew what it meant to lose everything and still show up for someone else. Because when I told him I was scared to be a step-parent, he just smiled and said, "Then we'll learn together." And Ethan. God, Ethan. The first time he called me Mom, I was in the laundry room folding socks. Not a special moment, no audience. Just us and the hum of the dryer. "Mom, can I have a snack?" I froze. Completely forgot how to breathe. He looked up at me, eyebrows furrowed like maybe he'd made a mistake. "You called me Mom," I said. I didn't mean to," he stammered, backing up like he'd broken something. "No," I whispered, dropping the sock, falling to my knees. "No, honey, it's okay. It's more than okay." I cried into his shirt while he hugged me back with his tiny arms, and from that day forward, I made myself a promise: you'll never feel second best again. That promise was my compass. Every school drop-off, every nightmare soothed, every scraped knee and awkward question. I didn't always get it right, but I showed up. Every damn day. Because love, real love, isn't loud. It doesn't brag. It just shows up. And leading up to the wedding, I clung to that dream like a lifeline. We'd gotten Ethan a little matching boutonniere. He looked so proud in his tiny suit. He held the rings during the ceremony. Daniel teared up more when Ethan handed them to him than during the vows. It was perfect. It was ours. Until my mother whispered to me before the reception, "He doesn't need to be part of the photos, Emily. Let's just have the real family in some." And Clarissa? She didn't even address Ethan the entire day. She floated through the bridal suite like a queen, complimenting decor, taking selfies, sipping champagne, like she wasn't actively erasing a child from a day that was supposed to include him. Still, I let it go. Smiled through it. Told myself it was nerves. Stress. That maybe they'd thaw once the party started. Maybe the warmth of the evening would melt the ice between us. But then the whispers started. I heard them from across the room, where Clarissa stood with a group of guests, laughing over wine. Emily always had to fix something broken. Now she's playing stepmom like it's a Lifetime movie. A few chuckles. She married a charity case. Clarissa smirked. Two of them, actually. The music swelled, people danced, glasses clinked. But all I heard was that, over and over, like a scratched record. Charity case, two of them. I smiled for the camera, posed with Ethan, kissed Daniel under the string lights. But something was shifting, cracking. And when Ethan found me later, tugging on my dress, eyes wide and watery, I knew. Grandma said I'm not really family, he whispered. And just like that, the knife in my hand wasn't for cake anymore. It was for the truth. They all looked at me like I was the star of some fairy tale. The flowers were flawless, my dress was glowing, and the night hummed with that thick, glittery sheen of perfection. But their eyes lied. Because behind the curated smiles and raised champagne flutes, I could feel it. Watching, judging, waiting. From the moment the morning started, the pressure had been building like a storm behind glass. My mother arrived at the bridal suite 2 hours late with a thin smile and cold compliments. "Oh, your makeup's bold," she said, her voice sweet and sour all at once. "And that neckline? It's not too late to pin it a little higher, right?" Her hands moved toward me before I even had time to answer, like I was a dressmaker's dummy she could alter at will. Clarissa swept in after her, glittering in a silver dress 2 shades too close to white. I should have said something, but I didn't. Of course I didn't. That's how they trained me. To keep the peace, to be the reasonable one, to smile through it. Ethan had peeked into the room then, face flushed with excitement, holding a small box of flower petals like it was treasure. "Is it time?" he asked, eyes flicking between me and the army of women powdering my face and tugging at my sleeves. "Not yet, baby," I said, reaching for him. But before I could touch him, Clarissa stepped in front of me. "You should be with your dad," she said to him, too cheerful, too loud. "This is the bride's space, sweetie." She didn't even look at me when she said it. I didn't argue. I watched him retreat, shoulders sagging, still clutching the petals like maybe they'd protect him. The ceremony itself went by in a blur. Vows. Rings. Kisses. Ethan handing us the symbols of our promise like a quiet little guardian angel in a bow tie. And for one suspended moment, I believed the dream. But the reception was different. People shifted, whispered, smiled too wide or not at all. My mother sat stiffly at the family table like someone had dared her to enjoy herself. Clarissa floated between groups, all false laughter and backhanded compliments. I caught her standing near the bar, one arm draped around a groomsman, giggling about how Emily went full rehab fantasy and married a man with a kid and a dead wife, like some dollar store fairy tale. The laughter was soft, but not quiet enough. I saw Ethan wince when he walked by them, his little face crumpling like paper. He looked up at me across the room, lost. I moved toward him, but Daniel was faster. He scooped Ethan into his arms and carried him outside to the garden. I watched them disappear into the dark and felt something inside me splinter. And then came the cake. We were standing together, knife in hand, ready to cut through the first slice while everyone gathered with their phones up like we were royalty. I looked at Daniel. He smiled. I looked at Ethan. He was back, his eyes still puffy but trying to be brave. I looked at my mother, who wouldn't meet my gaze. And then I heard it. Clarissa's voice again, sharp and low, cutting through the chatter. "I mean, she can't have her own kid, right? So this is just convenient." The knife slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a loud, ringing clang. Silence. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, puzzled. Waiting. And for the first time in my life, I didn't retreat. I picked up the mic. My hands were shaking. But my voice wasn't. I don't know what they expected me to say. Maybe something polite. Maybe a joke. Maybe that I'd dropped the knife because of nerves or slippery frosting, anything to keep the peace. But I wasn't interested in peace anymore. I was interested in the truth. I took a breath that scraped the back of my throat. My mother stared at me, her lips tightening like she could will me into silence. Clarissa tilted her head, amused, already preparing to spin whatever came next into one of her charming little stories. But I wasn't a story they could rewrite. I was going to talk about the cake, I began, voice low and trembling, about how we chose vanilla because it's Ethan's favorite, about how we wanted this moment to be sweet and warm and shared. I looked at Ethan. His small hand gripped Daniel's fingers tightly. His eyes, God, those eyes, were wide and frightened and confused. But that's not what tonight has been. Not really, I said, turning back to the crowd. Because while some of you danced and drank and toasted, others whispered. Others laughed. Others made a little boy feel like he didn't belong. A few murmurs, the shuffling of uncomfortable feet. No one moved. I heard it all, I said. The comments about my marriage, my stepson, my worth. The suggestion that I married a man with a child out of desperation. That I'm playing pretend. That Ethan isn't really family. The words hung heavy in the air. No music, no clinking glasses, just the thick weight of exposure. I saw Clarissa glance around, gauging the reactions. Her smile had vanished. My mother's face was stone. I was raised to believe love came with conditions, I said, softer now, that it had to be earned, that being chosen meant being perfect. And when I fell short, when I didn't fit the mold, I was told I was difficult, dramatic, too much. I looked down at the cake, untouched, pristine, a symbol of celebration waiting for a joy that had been stolen. I spent my whole life trying to be enough for people who decided I never would be. And I made peace with that, I thought. Until tonight. Until I watched the people who claimed to love me reduce a child, my child, to a joke. My voice cracked then. Just once. But I held steady. Ethan is not a placeholder, he is not a burden, he is not a charity case, he is my son. Chosen. Loved. Enough. Daniel reached for me, silent but steady, his hand warm against mine. And if you can't see that, I finished, scanning the room, locking eyes with my mother, then you don't see me either. And you're not welcome in this version of my family. Clarissa opened her mouth, but Daniel stepped forward before she could speak. We're done pretending, he said quietly. And just like that, the party shattered. My mother stood abruptly and stormed out, her heels sharp against the floor. Clarissa followed, muttering something under her breath. But the silence they left behind wasn't empty. It was clean. It was honest. And when Ethan walked up to me, wrapping his arms around my waist and whispering, "Thank you, Mom," I knew. This was the beginning of something real. The hotel room was quiet when we got back. Too quiet. The kind that makes your own breathing sound like thunder. I stood by the window in my wedding dress, staring out at the city lights, while Daniel helped Ethan change into pajamas. The laughter and music from the reception still echoed in my ears like a memory I hadn't fully let go of yet. But none of it felt real anymore. I could still feel the weight of the mic in my hand. The silence that followed my words. The way people looked at me like I'd set fire to the centerpiece. Maybe I had. Ethan padded over to me in his little socked feet, hair messy, face clean and flushed from too many emotions in one day. He tugged at the hem of my dress. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah, baby," I said, kneeling to meet his eyes. "We're going home." Daniel walked over and placed a hand on my back. I leaned into him, needing the anchor. He didn't speak, didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't have to. His presence said enough. After Ethan fell asleep in the second bed, curled around the stuffed bear I'd given him the day I moved in, Daniel and I sat together on the floor. My veil was crumpled beside us, my shoes kicked across the room. I felt raw. Stripped. But not broken. "I keep replaying it," I said. The way she looked at him? Like he was, in the way. Like he was something to ignore. Daniel nodded slowly. "I know. I saw it too." I swallowed hard. "Do you think I made it worse? That maybe I should have just let it go until after?" "No." He cut in, firm. No, you didn't make it worse. You told the truth. His eyes found mine, steady, unwavering. And I've never been more proud of you. The tears came then. Fast and messy. Not from shame, not from guilt, but from the release. The unbearable relief of finally saying out loud what I'd buried for years. She told him he wasn't really family, I whispered, my voice shaking. What kind of person does that to a child? The kind of person who doesn't understand love unless it's on her terms. I nodded slowly, wiping my cheeks with the back of my hand. I promised him he'd never feel second best. And you kept that promise, Daniel said. You dropped everything for him, for us. There was a knock at the door then, soft, tentative. Daniel got up, peered through the peephole, and frowned. It's your dad. My stomach twisted. He stepped inside quietly, holding something small in his hand, an envelope. I wanted to give you this, he said gently. Before your mother finds a way to twist the story. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a check and a note. I'm sorry I didn't speak up, but I heard everything. Inside was a check and a note. I'm sorry I didn't speak up, but I heard everything. And you were right. I'm proud of you. I should have said it there, he added. But I was scared. That's not an excuse, just the truth. I nodded. We didn't hug. We weren't that kind of family. But I saw the regret in his eyes. It wasn't enough. But it was something. After he left, Daniel sat back beside me. You didn't break your family, he said quietly. You survived them. And just like that, I exhaled, the kind of breath that feels like a beginning. The morning after the wedding felt like waking up in someone else's life. The bed sheets were tangled around my legs, my makeup smudged on the pillowcase, and the silence of the hotel room pressed against my ears like static. I stared at the ceiling, numb. Not from regret, but from the weight of everything that had finally surfaced. I didn't feel like a bride. I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like a survivor. And maybe that was more powerful than anything I could have imagined. Daniel was already up, padding around the room in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, his hair still messy from sleep. He glanced over when he saw me stirring and gave me a soft smile, the kind that didn't ask questions, just existed to remind me he was still here. I made coffee, he said, holding out a mug. I took it, fingers curling around the warmth like it might hold me up. Thanks. Across the room, Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching in the little notebook I'd given him the week before. He looked calm, like the tension that had haunted his shoulders the day before had loosened its grip. I walked over, crouched beside him. Watch a drawing, he held it up. A crooked house with 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small, all smiling, all standing under a tree. That's us, he said. I made a new house. A lump rose in my throat. It's beautiful. He paused, then glanced up at me, voice low. Are we really a family now, even if Grandma says no? I sat beside him, pulled him close. We were always a family, sweetheart, but yesterday we made sure everyone knew. He rested his head on my shoulder. Good. And in that moment, something shifted in me. I realized I didn't need an apology from my mother. Or Clarissa. I didn't need their permission to claim my place, or Ethan's. What we needed now wasn't their approval. It was a new ritual. Something that was just ours. That's how Stepmom Saturdays started. It began with pancakes. That morning, I tied my hair back, put on the hotel robe, and let Ethan pour way too much syrup over the mini pancakes we made on the room's hot plate. Daniel handled the coffee. We set the table with plastic cups and napkins from the takeout drawer. We didn't dress up, we didn't follow a plan. We just sat. Together. We talked about cartoons and dinosaurs and how Ethan wanted to learn how to skateboard. I told him I'd probably fall and break something, but I'd try anyway. Daniel promised to be the referee when we inevitably argued about who had the better tricks. We laughed. Real laughter. The kind that cracked open something inside and let the light in. And in the quiet that followed, Ethan reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Thanks, Mom, he said. I didn't correct him. I never would. There's a certain kind of silence that follows peace, the kind you don't notice right away because your body is still bracing for impact. That's what the next few days felt like. I kept waiting for something to break. For the knock on the door. For the email. The passive-aggressive text. The cold tap of guilt from my mother disguised as concern. But nothing came, no phone calls, no apologies, just quiet. Daniel returned to work. Ethan started school again. I spent the mornings cleaning up the last of the wedding mess. Thank you cards I never wanted to write, floral invoices, a half-destroyed box of decorations I didn't have the heart to throw out. I left my wedding dress hanging in the back of the closet, untouched, like a ghost of a version of myself that no longer existed. I thought, maybe that was it. That my family had written me off as efficiently as they had written Ethan out of the wedding photos. That they'd pretend I was going through some phase and wait for me to come crawling back. But on Thursday morning, while Ethan was at school and I was elbow-deep in laundry, the doorbell rang. I froze. Something in me knew before I even looked through the peephole. My mother stood on the porch, arms crossed, a tight smile painted across her face like brittle icing. I didn't open the door right away. I watched her for a moment. Watched the way her eyes scanned our porch like she was assessing property, not visiting her daughter. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Annoyed. Impatient. Uninvited. Finally, I opened it. "Emily," she said, too warmly. "You look tired." I didn't answer. Just stepped aside enough to let her in or let her walk away. The choice was hers. She walked in like she owned the air. "I assume you know why I'm here." I raised an eyebrow. "To apologize?" Her mouth twitched. "To talk." She walked through the house like she was inspecting it, pausing to glance at Ethan's drawings taped to the fridge. "This place is cozy," she said. I folded my arms. "Cut to it." She sighed. "Your little display at the wedding was inappropriate. Emotional. You embarrassed us, Emily." There it was. Us. Not Ethan. Not me. Not Daniel. Us. The perfect curated image of our family that cracked like glass under the weight of one honest speech. "You told a child he wasn't family," I said, voice steady. "I was drinking," she replied. "And you were provoking, bringing that boy into everything? It wasn't about him." "It was always about him," I snapped. "And you knew that?" Her eyes narrowed. "You really think this makes you a hero? Turning your back on your family?" I laughed. Short. Bitter. "You're not my family," I said. "You're blood. That's biology. Family is love. Choice. And Ethan? He's more family to me than you've ever been." She stared at me, stunned. And I didn't flinch. "You need to come home," she said finally, softer. "Your real family needs you." I stepped back, one hand on the door. "My real family is inside this house," I said. "And they need me safe, not small." I opened the door. She stood there for a beat too long, face unreadable. Then she left. No hug. No goodbye. Just footsteps fading down the porch. I closed the door behind her. And this time, it felt like closing a chapter. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and nerves. I'd been there before, traffic tickets, paperwork for work stuff, but this time was different. This time, we weren't there to pay a fine or ask for permission. We were there to claim something that had already been true for a long time. The adoption hearing wasn't dramatic. There were no grand speeches or surprise objections. Just a modest courtroom with a tired-looking judge, a few forms, and 3 people sitting close together on a wooden bench. Daniel squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. Ethan swung his legs, too short to reach the floor, his dress shoes scuffed and his clip-on tie slightly crooked. I'd fixed it 3 times already that morning, but he kept tugging on it when he got nervous. "Are you sure this is okay?" he whispered to me, voice barely above a breath. My heart cracked open all over again. "Yes, baby," I said, brushing his hair back gently. "It's more than okay." The judge glanced through the file, murmured something to the clerk, then looked at us over the top of his glasses. "I see we're here for a step-parent adoption," he said. "And, young man, do you want this?" Ethan looked at me, eyes wide. I nodded. He nodded. "Yes, sir," he said. The judge smiled. "Then let's make this official." And just like that, with a signature and a stamped seal, the law caught up with what our hearts already knew. Ethan James Turner. My son. Afterward, we stood outside the building, squinting into the bright afternoon sun. Daniel took pictures of me and Ethan standing under the courthouse steps. I didn't cry during the hearing, but I cried then, in the sunlight, in the joy, in the final, undeniable truth of it. "You okay?" Daniel asked, wrapping his arm around me. "I'm perfect," I said. But the moment that will live in me forever came just a few minutes later. We were sitting on a park bench near the courthouse, eating ice cream from a vendor cart. Ethan had chocolate smeared on his chin and sprinkles in his lap. He was quiet, spooning ice cream slowly, his face thoughtful in that way kids get when something big is shifting in their world. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something," he said, handing it to me. I opened it. A crumpled sheet of notebook paper. Crayon-written words in shaky print. "I used to wish for a mom. Now I have one who fought for me." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I just held him. Held him like I had the day he first called me mom. Held him like he was the most precious truth I'd ever been given. Daniel knelt beside us, arms around both of us, his eyes shining too. We sat there, on that old park bench, in our secondhand clothes and our forever family, wrapped in each other. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a placeholder. I felt chosen. The party was Ethan's idea. Not a birthday, not a holiday, not any kind of traditional milestone. Just a celebration, he said. A forever family party. He even made the invitation himself. Markers and glitter and a paper full of crooked hearts. "You are invited to the unbirthday. It's like a birthday but for our family. Wear comfy clothes. There will be pancakes." We mailed it to no one. Hand-delivered it to the people who mattered, the neighbor who watched Ethan when Daniel had to work late, my coworker Leah, who dropped off lasagna the week after the wedding, Daniel's sister, who never picked sides but always picked love, and Olivia, my oldest friend, who'd once looked me in the eye and said, "You deserve a life that loves you back." Everyone else? Well, they weren't invited. We hung handmade decorations from the ceiling. Paper chains and streamers Ethan spent hours coloring. I let him pick the music. Our living room filled with pop songs, dog barks, laughter, the scent of syrup, and something I hadn't felt in years: ease. There was no cake knife this time. No tension under the frosting. Just a stack of pancakes as tall as Ethan's arm and a little flag on top that read, "Team Turner." We wore matching t-shirts. Mine said, "Bonus Mom." Ethan said, "Forever Son." Daniel's just said, "Lucky." People brought silly gifts, homemade cards, pancake mix, a ridiculous stuffed giraffe wearing a crown. Someone handed me a photo frame, and inside was a picture someone had snapped during the courthouse adoption. The three of us standing together. Smiling, whole. Not perfect, but real. At one point, Ethan stood on a chair, holding a paper megaphone he'd crafted from a cereal box. "Attention!" he shouted. Everyone turned. "I just want to say thank you for coming to our unbirthday." And also, he looked at me, eyes shining. I have the best mom. She picked me even when other people didn't. My heart could have burst. I didn't cry though. Not this time. I just pulled him into my arms and whispered, "And I'll keep picking you. Every single day." The room clapped. Someone whistled. Daniel kissed the top of my head and muttered, "We're gonna need a bigger house." Later, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were soaking in the sink, I stood in the middle of the living room, spinning slowly in the quiet. I looked around at the colored paper scraps, the syrup-sticky floor, the crumbs of joy that lingered in every corner. This wasn't the life I came from. It was the life I built. chosen, crafted, claimed. And every bit of it, every unbirthday moment was mine. Some wounds don't bleed. They whisper. You can be surrounded by love, tucked under a blanket of safety, and still feel the tug of old ghosts pulling at the hem of your joy. That's how it started. Quiet. A thought that slithered in when the house was still and everyone was asleep. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I was too dramatic. Maybe, God, maybe I'm turning into her. I'd catch myself standing at the kitchen sink, dishes in my hands, suddenly hearing my mother's voice in my head. Not her literal voice, but the echo of it. The way she said my name when I dared to take up space. The way she stared when I cried. The sigh she gave every time I asked for more than she was willing to give. And in those moments, I'd wonder if I'd gone too far. If cutting them off wasn't strength, but selfishness. Daniel noticed first. You've been quiet, he said one night, drying dishes beside me. I shrugged. Just tired. He didn't push. He never did. But later, when we were in bed and I stared at the ceiling instead of sleeping, he turned toward me. Talk to me. So I did. In pieces. I told him about the voice I couldn't shake. About the weight that pressed against my chest when I remembered how easily I'd closed that door on my mother. About the guilt that tasted like rust in my throat every time Ethan called me, Mom. And a part of me whispered, You're not enough. Daniel listened. He always listened. Then he reached for my hand, slid his fingers between mine. You didn't cut them off, he said. You set a boundary. There's a difference. I turned to look at him. You didn't break anything, Em. You protected yourself. And you protected Ethan. But what if I was wrong? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. What if someday he grows up and thinks I overreacted? That I kept him from his grandparents? That I let my hurt make decisions for all of us? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then we'll tell him the truth, he said. We'll show him what love is. Over and over. Until he knows the difference. I cried then. Not because I was sad, but because being seen, truly seen, is its own kind of ache. The next day, I called a therapist. Sat in her office with my hands clenched in my lap and said, I don't know how to trust myself. She smiled. Then let's learn how. It wasn't dramatic. No grand epiphany. Just small steps. Weekly appointments. Hard questions. Journal entries that started with, I feel, and usually ended in tears. I told her about my mother, about the years of cold smiles and sharper words, about the way I learned to disappear in a room to keep the peace. She nodded. Took notes. Asked, when was the first time you felt like love had to be earned? That question haunted me for days. But it also unlocked something. Because I realized I'd spent my whole life waiting to be chosen by people who only knew how to keep score. Now, I was learning how to choose myself. And in doing so, I was finally becoming the mother I always needed. It arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a coupon flyer and a dentist reminder. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy, expensive. My name written in soft cursive, the kind that tries too hard to be gentle. I knew who it was from before I opened it. I don't know how. Maybe it was the weight. Guilt has a texture. I stood at the kitchen counter, staring at it for a long time. Ethan was at school, Daniel was at work, the house was still. I had no excuse to delay. Inside was a folded card. Gold embossed flowers. Her favorite kind. Inside, a message written in two distinct scripts. From my mother, I hope you've had time to reflect. Families have disagreements, but airing them in front of guests was unkind. You embarrassed us. We can talk when you're ready to be reasonable. From Clarissa, scribbled in the bottom corner like a sticky note. Hope your perfect families is worth it. Let me know when you're done playing house. My throat closed. Not with sadness, not even with rage, just disbelief. Even now, after everything, after I stood in front of them and tore the truth into the open, they still thought this was about embarrassment, that I performed pain for attention, that the issue wasn't what they did, but that I dared to speak it out loud. I set the card down, walked into the bathroom, washed my hands even though they weren't dirty. Then I sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the white tile like it could explain something. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt this deep, aching numbness. Like standing in a house you grew up in and suddenly realizing none of it ever really belonged to you. Daniel found me there an hour later. He didn't ask what happened. He just picked up the card from the hallway floor, read it in silence, then tore it in half. "Do you want to keep the pieces?" he asked, already reaching for the trash. "No," I said. "I'm done sorting through their wreckage." He nodded. Later, after Ethan got home, I watched him run through the living room with a toy spaceship, laughing as he crash-landed it into the couch cushions. I wondered how anyone could see him and still pretend he wasn't real, that his presence was some act of rebellion, not the greatest act of love I'd ever known. Daniel caught me watching. "They don't understand," he said softly. "No," I replied. "And they don't want to." That night, I lit a candle and wrote my own card. No gold foil, no cursive, just a blank postcard. On it, I wrote, "You don't get to define my family. You lost that right the day you tried to erase my son." I never sent it. Some things are better said for yourself alone. Because closure, I've learned, doesn't come from their apology. It comes from refusing to need one. It was tucked between the mattress and the wall, folded like a secret and scribbled in pencil. I only found it because Ethan dropped his stuffed bear behind the bed, and when I reached down to grab it, my fingers brushed the edge of the paper. At first, I thought it was just a doodle. He was always drawing. Dinosaurs, rocket ships, us. But when I opened it, I saw his careful block letters, spaced out like he was trying hard to be neat. My chest tightened as I read. "If I mess up too much, will you give me back?" That's all it said. One sentence. No greeting, no sign-off. Just that one question, hanging there like a threadbare lifeline. I sat on the edge of his bed, clutching the note. The room felt too quiet, too big. I didn't cry, not right away. I just stared at the wall, willing the ache in my chest to settle. It didn't. Ethan was downstairs, watching cartoons, curled up in his favorite blanket. I heard the faint murmur of the TV and his soft laugh. It sounded so normal, like he hadn't just cracked open his heart and left it where I could find it. I walked down slowly, holding the note like it was made of glass. He looked up when I entered the room, his smile fading as soon as he saw my face. I knelt in front of him. "Hey, buddy." He shifted nervously. "Did I do something wrong?" I shook my head. "No, baby. But I found your note." He froze. I held it up, gently. "Can we talk about it?" He bit his lip and nodded, eyes shining. I sat beside him, pulling him into my lap the way I used to when he was smaller. He leaned into me, his body tense. "Why did you write this?" I asked softly. He didn't answer at first, just shrugged. Then, after a long pause, "Sometimes I think, if I'm too bad, or too loud, or if I forget to do my homework, you'll change your mind." My heart shattered, quietly and completely. "Oh, Ethan," I whispered, pressing my cheek to his hair. "Sweetheart, no. No. That's not how this works," he sniffled. "But I'm not really yours. What if you stop wanting me?" I pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "Listen to me. You are mine. Not because of papers. Not because of rules. Because I choose you. Every day. Forever." He blinked at me. "Even if I mess up?" "Especially then," I said. "Family doesn't go away when it's hard. That's what love means. That's what being yours means." His arms wrapped around me fast, tight, like he was scared I might disappear mid-sentence. I held him until my legs went numb, until the sun dipped below the window line, until the weight in his body softened with safety. That night, we sat down together with fresh paper. I wrote a new note. Let him help color it. "You are ours, forever. No returns. No refunds. Just love." We taped it to the wall above his bed. And every night after that, when I tucked him in, he'd point to it and smile. Just to make sure. Just to remember. The pen hovered over the form for a long time. My hand didn't shake exactly. It just paused. Like it knew what a big thing this was. Like it wanted to mark the moment. Name of child to be adopted, Ethan James Turner. Petitioner, Emily Turner. Relationship, step-parent. I glanced up at Daniel, who sat across the table, fingers interlaced, watching me with that quiet steadiness that had kept me grounded for months. Ethan sat between us, coloring in the margins of a dog-eared comic book, unaware of the gravity of the moment. Or maybe, not unaware. Just safe. You sure? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel smiled. You've been his mother since the day he let you into his world. This just makes it official. I nodded slowly, lowering the pen. And signed. The paperwork wasn't glamorous. Just ink and lines and procedural checkboxes. But it felt like I was signing a vow. A deeper one than vows whispered under an arbor or printed in a wedding program. This one was for Ethan. For our family. For every moment we'd stitched together with love instead of blood. When we told Ethan, he didn't say anything at first, just blinked at the envelope like it might bite him. Then, softly, "Does this mean I get to keep you forever?" I knelt beside him, cupped his face in my hands. "Baby, you already do. The papers just help everyone else catch up." His eyes welled. "Can I tell my teacher?" "Of course," Daniel said, kneeling beside us. "Tell everyone." "Even Grandma?" he asked. There was a pause. A silence that settled heavy between us. I didn't lie. "No," I said gently. "Not everyone deserves to be part of this. But the people who matter, they're going to be so happy." He nodded slowly, lips pressed tight. "Then, can I draw a new family tree?" "Yeah," I whispered. "Make it wild. Add dragons if you want." He grinned. "Can I put you at the top?" I couldn't speak. I just pulled him in and held him until the lump in my throat dissolved into something warmer. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I sat in the hallway and cried. Not out of grief, not even relief, but joy. The kind of joy that comes from choosing and being chosen back. I was no longer just mom by love. I was mom by law. And that meant something. It meant everything. She showed up on a Sunday, no warning, no text, just the doorbell, and then her standing there like she hadn't set fire to our lives and walked away whistling. My mother. She looked the same, which somehow made it worse. Tailored coat, pearl earrings, eyes that still scanned a room before settling on its people. I opened the door, slowly, the safety chain still hooked. She smiled. Tight. Polished. "I thought we could talk." I didn't say anything. She glanced past me, into the living room, as if she could will her way inside. "I saw the adoption post. You made quite a statement." It hadn't been a statement, just a photo. Me, Daniel, Ethan, all smiles outside the courthouse. A caption, "Forever Family," officially. But maybe to her, love always looked like rebellion. "You could have called," I said flatly. "I tried. You blocked me." I raised an eyebrow. "Because you made a child cry on his mother's wedding day." Her jaw twitched. She held a small purse in both hands like it might shield her from the words. "I still don't understand," she said. "You act like we attacked him. You told him he wasn't family. I was drinking. You meant it." Her eyes flicked to the floor, the act slipping for a second. Then, "He's not blood, Emily." There it was. The sentence she kept dressing up in prettier words finally laid bare. "He'll never be blood," she repeated, quieter this time. "You can't just rewrite biology." I didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just looked at her, really looked at her and felt the deepest sadness I've ever known. Not for me. For her. "You're right," I said. "He's not blood." She blinked, surprised. But blood never protected me. Blood didn't sit through nightmares or read stories at 2 a.m. Blood didn't patch scraped knees or draw me pictures of our family. Blood didn't ask if I'd still love him if he made mistakes. I stepped back and opened the door wider, not to let her in, but to make the next words clear. Love does. Her lips parted, some retort forming. But I was done waiting for softness from a mouthful of knives. I'm raising a boy who knows he's loved, I said. Who knows his family will fight for him, not against him. And if that makes me disloyal to biology, then so be it. She stared at me, eyes sharp. Still calculating. Still trying to find the angle that would unravel me. But there wasn't one anymore. I closed the door. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just firmly. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed her to knock again. The courtroom felt smaller this time. Maybe because we weren't nervous. Maybe because this time we walked in not as people hoping to be seen, but as a family already stitched together by love, by time, by choice. Daniel held Ethan's hand. I held the other. We took our seats on the same wooden bench, but everything felt different. Lighter. We weren't proving anything today. We were celebrating. The judge, a woman this time, smiled when she saw us. She flipped through the file, nodded. It's always nice to see a family that's already doing the work before the paperwork even catches up. Ethan beamed. When she asked if anyone wanted to say anything before she finalized the adoption, I started to shake my head. Then Ethan tugged on my sleeve. Can I? My heart skipped. The judge smiled. Of course. He stood. Not nervously, not shy. I used to wish for a mom, he said, voice clear in the quiet room. I didn't think I'd get one. But now I have one who fought for me, who picked me even when it was hard. Daniel's hand found mine. She makes pancakes on Saturdays and reads the same story even when she's tired. She never makes me feel like I'm a problem. He looked at me then. She makes me feel like I belong. The room went still. The judge dabbed at her eye with a tissue. Thank you, she said gently. That was beautiful. She signed the final form with a flourish. Congratulations. It's official. Applause broke out, soft and warm. Daniel pulled me close. Ethan threw his arms around us both. We took pictures. Outside on the courthouse steps. At the little diner down the street where we ordered 3 milkshakes and a plate of fries bigger than Ethan's head. He dipped the fries into his chocolate shake and said, "We need to do this every year." Deal, Daniel said. Later, when we got home, Ethan ran upstairs to show his framed certificate to his stuffed animals. I stood in the living room, shoes still on, staring at the photos from the day. I didn't see perfection. I saw realness. My hair was messy. Daniel's tie was crooked. Ethan had ketchup on his cheek. But we were smiling like we'd climbed a mountain and planted a flag at the top. Because we had. This was the family we built. Not given. Not inherited. Chosen. Again and again. And now, no one could take that from us. Not blood, not silence, not anyone. We didn't want another cake. We'd had enough of symbolism wrapped in sugar, enough of knives that sliced more than frosting. So for our unbirthday party, we skipped the cake entirely. Instead, we made waffles. Stacks of them, tall and golden, with whipped cream and strawberries and syrup in little heart-shaped dishes. Ethan had made a banner that read, For Evorevie, family in marker, each letter a different color, with glitter that still clung to our floorboards weeks later. No formal invitations. Just a group text. Come celebrate the best decision we ever made. The living room was filled with people who had showed up for us when it mattered. Leah from work. Mrs. Crosby, Ethan's art teacher. Daniel's sister, arms full of gifts wrapped in comics. Olivia, with homemade signs and a bottle of sparkling cider. No one brought drama. No one asked where my mother was. No one whispered anything but joy. Ethan wore a paper crown. He'd made one for me too. It said, Queen Mom, in purple crayon. Do I have to wear this all day? I'd asked, laughing as I placed it on my head. Yes, he said seriously. It's part of the rules. Daniel's crown said, Chief Dad. We looked ridiculous. We'd never been happier. At one point, Ethan stood on the coffee table and raised a plastic cup of apple juice. A toast, he announced, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. To the best family in the world, because we picked each other. Everyone clapped. Daniel pulled me close, whispering into my ear, "He's never going to forget this." I smiled. Neither will I. After the guests left and the glitter settled and the house hummed with quiet again, we collapsed onto the couch in a pile of limbs and warmth. Ethan curled up in my lap, half asleep. "Hey," he murmured, "do real families feel like this?" I kissed the top of his head. "The best ones do." He nodded. "I'm glad we're not normal." "Me too, baby." Outside, the stars blinked on. Inside, the lights were soft, the air full of syrup and love and laughter. No cake knives, no secrets. Just us. And in that simple, glowing moment, I knew. This wasn't the end of a journey. It was the start of 1,000 new ones. It started as a letter I never intended to send. Just something I typed one night after Ethan had gone to bed and Daniel was reading on the porch. I sat in front of the computer, fingers hovering over the keys, unsure where to start. And then the words just came, faster than I could catch them. "This isn't just a wedding story." That's how I began. I wrote about the knife dropping, the moment I realized silence was a kind of betrayal, about the little boy in a suit who stood too close to the cake table, unsure if he belonged. I wrote about whispered insults wrapped in champagne laughter, about how choosing love meant choosing war sometimes, especially when your enemy wore pearls and smiled in photos. I wrote about what it means to build a family from the ashes of the one that hurt you, about the difference between blood and belonging, about how love isn't passive, it's loud, messy, brave. How it doesn't whisper apologies behind closed doors, but stands up in front of 100 people and says, "You don't get to treat us like this anymore." When I finished, I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I hit submit. It was an op-ed. A raw, unfiltered letter about chosen family, boundaries, motherhood, and survival. I didn't expect it to be published. I definitely didn't expect it to go viral. But it did. People shared it, messaged me, commented. Thousands of voices chiming in, echoing back the same truth. Me too. Strangers wrote about cutting ties with toxic parents, about adopting children who weren't theirs, about reparenting themselves at 35, about building new families that felt like safety instead of sacrifice. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase what had happened. But it gave my voice back to me. And it gave Ethan something too. A world that understood us. He saw the article one morning, printed on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a slice of pizza. He read the headline slowly. "This isn't just a wedding, choosing love over legacy." "Is that about us?" he asked. "It's about you," I said, pulling him into a hug. "And me. And what we made together." He grinned. "Cool." Weeks later, we stood in the backyard, sawdust in our hair, hands covered in dirt and paint. Daniel held the blueprint, I held the hammer. Ethan held the nails. The treehouse wasn't perfect, it leaned a little. The ladder was crooked. But it was ours. Ethan stood inside it, looking down at us like a captain at sea. "Permission to come aboard?" I called up. He laughed. "Only if you say the password." I thought for a second. "Chosen." He grinned wide. "Correct." We climbed up together, all three of us, into the crooked, wonderful little home we built with our own hands, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was escaping my past. I felt like I was building something better.